Lily Harrison never heard the footsteps creeping toward her room that night. While her parents slept peacefully down the hall, the 16-year-old girl was brutally murdered in what would become the most horrifying crime Maple Heights had ever seen. By sunrise, her once cheerful bedroom had turned into a scene of blood and silence. And the shocking truth about who killed her would tear her family and the entire town apart. Maple Heights had always been the kind of town where bad things happened somewhere else. It was the place people moved to for quiet streets, friendly neighbors, and the illusion of safety. Lawns were neatly trimmed, porch lights glowed softly at night, and nothing ever seemed out of the ordinary. In the center of that quiet neighborhood stood the Harrison home, a modest two-story house with white shutters and flower beds that Lily Harrison tended every spring. 16 years old, Lily was everything her parents had hoped for. Bright, kind, and full of promise. She loved photography and could often be found wandering the backyard with her old Polaroid camera, capturing moments that most people would have overlooked. Her bedroom walls were covered in pictures, her parents smiling at the dinner table, her best friend laughing under the summer sun, and endless shots of orange and pink skies fading over Maple Heights. June 14th began like any other warm summer night. Lily stayed up later than usual, editing pictures on her laptop while music played softly in the background. Her parents had gone to bed around 11, saying goodnight as they always did. The house was peaceful, the faint ticking of the hallway clock marking the passing hours. But as the night deepened, something in the air shifted. A storm had been predicted, yet the skies remained unnervingly still. Outside, a streetlight flickered once and went out, casting a patch of darkness over the front yard. At some point after midnight, a faint noise echoed from outside, a creak, a soft scrape, something almost too quiet to notice. Lily, half asleep, dismissed it as the wind. She pulled her blanket closer and drifted back into dreams. Unbeknownst to her, a shadow lingered just beyond her window, watching, waiting. The next morning, no one would remember hearing footsteps or doors creak. The neighborhood dogs didn't bark. The silence was complete, as if the world itself had chosen not to interfere. At 7:12 a.m., the sun cast its first light over Maple Heights. Birds chirped, sprinklers hissed, and Mr. Harrison poured himself a cup of coffee. Everything seemed perfectly normal. When Mrs. Harrison went to wake Lily for school, she knocked gently on her daughter's door. There was no response. She knocked again, a little louder, still nothing. Thinking Lily had overslept, she turned the knob and stepped inside. The sight that met her eyes stopped her in her tracks. The room looked like a scene from a nightmare. Lily's body lay on the floor beside her bed, her white pajama top stained crimson. The walls, once covered with cheerful photographs, were splattered with blood. One of the bedside lamps had fallen and shattered, the bulb flickering weakly before going out. The blanket was crumpled near her feet, and the sheets beneath her were soaked through. A kitchen knife lay near her hand, gleaming faintly in the morning light. Mrs. Harrison's scream echoed through the house, bringing her husband running from downstairs. Within minutes, the peaceful home that had once been filled with laughter turned into a crime scene. Neighbors gathered outside in disbelief, whispering to each other as sirens pierced the calm morning air. Police cars and ambulances lined the quiet street that had never seen such chaos. Paramedics could only confirm what everyone feared. Lily Harrison was dead. Officers quickly sealed off the house, their faces grim as they surveyed the room where innocence had been brutally destroyed. The Harrison family's perfect world had shattered overnight. No one could understand how something so horrific could happen in a place so ordinary. There were no signs of forced entry, no screams in the night, and no reason for anyone to harm a girl like Lily. Yet there she was, lifeless in her own room, while her parents had slept just a few feet away. The news would soon spread through Maple Heights like wildfire, but for now, all that remained was the echo of Mrs. Harrison's scream and the haunting stillness that followed. Detectives arrived within the hour, their cars crowding the curb outside the Harrison home. The peaceful street now looked like a scene from a television crime drama. Yellow tape fluttered in the morning breeze, Curious neighbors stood in their driveways, and reporters began to gather at the end of the block. Inside, investigators moved carefully through the house, documenting every inch of the scene. There was no sign of forced entry. Every door was locked, every window latched except Lily's, which was slightly ajar. The latch bore faint scratches as though someone had tried to close it in a hurry. On the floor beneath the window, detectives found a faint shoe print, half smudged by the carpet fibers. The room itself told a story that no one wanted to hear. The coroner estimated the time of death to be between midnight and 2 in the morning. Lily's injuries were brutal, over a dozen stab wounds, each deliberate and controlled. The medical examiner noted there were no defensive wounds, meaning she likely never had a chance to fight back. The sheer violence suggested deep anger or obsession. Whoever had done this had not acted in panic, but with intention. Detective Karen Doyle, a seasoned investigator with 2 decades of experience, led the case. She had seen her share of tragedy, but something about this scene unsettled her. The careful arrangement of objects, the absence of chaos except for the violence itself. It felt almost staged. As her team collected evidence, she noticed something odd. The walls were lined with photographs, but one frame was missing. A small square of clean paint marked the spot where it should have been. On the desk, a camera sat open, its memory card still inside. Doyle ordered it sent to forensics downstairs. The Harrisons sat in shock. Mrs. Harrison was wrapped in a blanket, her eyes hollow from crying. Mr. Harrison stared blankly at the floor, his hands trembling. Between sobs, they answered questions as best they could. They had gone to bed around 11. Both of them sound asleep until morning. They hadn't heard a thing, not a scream, not a thump, nothing. Their story was consistent, and there was no sign of deceit. Still, Doyle couldn't shake the feeling that something about their quiet composure didn't sit right. Later that afternoon, the lab processed Lily's camera. Hundreds of photos filled the memory card, most of them harmless shots, friends at school, flowers in the yard, and family dinners. But near the end of the roll, one picture stood out. It showed Lily's bedroom window from the outside, taken at night. The faint outline of a person could be seen standing in the shadows. At first, it seemed like a trick of the light, but when technicians enhanced the image, a pale face came into focus. The person was watching her from the yard. The timestamp indicated it had been taken just a few nights before her death. Detectives began piecing together a picture of Lily's last days. Her friends mentioned she had been withdrawn lately, distracted and uneasy. One friend said she had complained about feeling like someone was following her. She thought it was her imagination, the way the mind plays tricks in the dark. Yet looking back, it all seemed like a warning she hadn't understood. Forensics also found something peculiar near Lily's bed, a small torn piece of black fabric clutched in her hand. It didn't match anything in her closet or bedding. The lab confirmed it contained traces of male DNA. It was their first real lead. But the results would take days. As night fell, Detective Doyle stood outside the Harrison home, watching as crime scene technicians loaded evidence bags into their van. The house that had once represented safety and love was now a place of nightmares. The neighborhood lights flickered on one by one, each family silently wondering if the danger was still among them. Somewhere out there, a killer was walking free, calm and invisible, blending in like any other neighbor on Maple Heights. The question now wasn't just who had killed Lily Harrison, but how they had entered a locked house and vanished without a trace. The murder of Lily Harrison sent shockwaves through Maple Heights. The community that once prided itself on safety now lived in quiet fear. Parents began checking on their children at night, locking every window twice and installing security systems they'd never thought they'd need. The local news ran constant updates, showing pictures of Lily smiling in her school uniform. Candlelight vigils were held in front of her house, flowers piling up on the front lawn like a memorial garden. Behind the scenes, detectives were still searching for answers, piecing together fragments of evidence that didn't seem to fit. Detective Doyle's team had spent days combing through Lily's life. her school records, her phone, and her social media accounts. Most of her messages were typical teenage chatter, but one contact stood out. The username was Nightwalker92. The conversation started innocently enough, talks about music, photography, and school, but soon turned unsettling. The messages became possessive and controlling, asking where she was, what she was wearing, and who she was with. The last message Lily ever received read, "If you tell anyone, you'll regret it." Investigators traced the IP address to a nearby coffee shop's Wi-Fi, making it impossible to pinpoint the sender. Meanwhile, forensics returned results from the crime scene. The torn black fabric found in Lily's hand contained traces of oil and dust, commonly found on work clothes. That small clue shifted the investigation toward the neighborhood, particularly those who worked with machinery or in garages. One name quickly surfaced: Ethan Miller, the Harrisons' next-door neighbor. 21 years old, Ethan was quiet, polite, and had once babysat Lily when she was younger. He spent most of his time repairing cars in his parents' garage and was known for keeping odd hours. Detectives visited the Miller home early one morning. Ethan appeared calm but nervous, answering questions politely while avoiding eye contact. He claimed he had been home all night, asleep in his room. His parents supported his story, though neither could confirm it firsthand. When officers asked to inspect his shoes, he hesitated before handing them over. The soles matched the partial footprint found near Lily's window. A search warrant was issued within hours. Inside his room, they found a small stash of photographs, some of cars, some of street views, and a few of Lily. One photo in particular showed her standing by her window, unaware she was being watched. The evidence was compelling but not definitive. There were no fingerprints linking him directly to the crime, no blood on his clothes, and the DNA on the torn fabric didn't match his. Ethan insisted the photos were old, taken when he and Lily were friends. Still, neighbors began whispering, and his family found themselves shunned overnight. For the first time, Maple Heights felt divided. Some believed Ethan was guilty, while others were convinced he was a scapegoat. Detective Doyle wasn't satisfied. Something about Ethan's calmness under pressure bothered her, but when a new piece of evidence surfaced, it changed everything. A neighbor a few houses down reviewed their doorbell camera footage and found something chilling: a blurry figure walking along the sidewalk at 2:43 a.m., roughly the time Lily's smartwatch recorded a spike in her heart rate. The person wore dark clothing and a hood, and though the image was grainy, it was clear the figure was carrying something long, possibly a knife or tool. The footage ended as the figure turned toward the Harrisons' house and disappeared into the darkness. Ethan denied it was him, and investigators couldn't prove otherwise. Yet the timing, the proximity, and the shoe print painted a troubling picture. For days, the town buzzed with rumors, theories spreading like wildfire. Some said it was a drifter. Others whispered about a stalker targeting girls. But as the investigation deepened, Detective Doyle began to suspect the truth was far more complicated than anyone imagined. Someone in Maple Heights was lying, and the real killer was still living among them, hiding in plain sight while the rest of the town slept in fear. Detective Doyle's instincts told her the case wasn't as simple as it appeared. Despite the evidence pointing toward Ethan Miller, too many details didn't fit. The DNA on the torn fabric belonged to someone else, and the missing photograph from Lily's wall still hadn't been found. Doyle knew the answer was hidden in Lily's personal life, in something she hadn't told anyone. The investigation shifted toward her digital footprint once again. Analysts combed through her phone records, email accounts, and private messages, trying to piece together the days leading up to her death. That's when they uncovered a hidden folder on her laptop. Buried among her school projects was a collection of photos she had never posted. Most were harmless: trees, pets, street corners, but a few made the detectives pause. In several late-night shots taken from her bedroom window, a shadowy figure appeared in the distance, always in the same spot across the street. The figure grew closer with each photo, until in the final one it stood directly beneath her window. The timestamp showed it was taken less than 2 hours before she died. When the images were enhanced, they revealed faint details: a hooded sweatshirt, pale hands, and a watch with a distinctive leather strap. Detective Doyle ordered every potential suspect checked for similar items. During a search of Ethan Miller's garage, they found tools, grease-stained overalls, and a black hoodie, but no watch. He maintained his innocence, and his mother tearfully insisted he was being framed. Still, Doyle couldn't ignore the sense that he was hiding something. A few days later, another lead emerged from an unexpected place. Forensics recovered data from Lily's deleted text messages. Several of them were to a contact saved only as D. The tone of the messages shifted from friendly to fearful over time. Her last message to him read, "I'm done with this. Don't come near my house again." The message had been sent at 12:08 a.m., less than an hour before her estimated time of death. The phone number was traced to an apartment complex 5 miles away. The name registered to it was Derek Lowe. Derek was a 30-year-old security guard who worked night shifts around Maple Heights. He had no criminal record, lived alone, and was described by neighbors as quiet but odd. When detectives arrived at his apartment, he didn't resist. Inside, they found dozens of photographs spread across his living room table. Images of neighborhood streets, schoolyards, and teenage girls, including many of Lily. Some appeared to have been taken through her bedroom window. His computer held hundreds more. When questioned, Derek admitted to watching Lily but denied harming her. He said he'd felt protective of her, claiming she reminded him of his younger sister who had died years ago. The fingerprints on Lily's window matched Derek's, confirming he had been there. But there was one problem: Derek's alibi. His work records and surveillance footage from his job showed he was on duty at a nearby factory from midnight until after 3 a.m., the time of the murder. He couldn't have been at the Harrison home when Lily was killed. Detective Doyle was back to the beginning with 2 suspects and no clear culprit. Derek had been watching her, but someone else had gone inside that night. The partial DNA from the fabric didn't match either man, and the missing photograph from Lily's room still hadn't turned up. Theories spread like wildfire. Some believed Derek had an accomplice, someone who carried out the attack while he kept watch. Others whispered that Lily's killer was someone she knew and trusted, someone who could walk into her room without her ever feeling afraid. Late one evening, as Doyle reviewed evidence at her desk, she noticed something that had gone unnoticed before. In the enhanced image from Lily's mirror, a faint shape reflected behind her, a hand wearing a watch with a worn leather strap, just like the one seen in the earlier photos. But this reflection wasn't from the window. It was from inside the room. That realization sent a chill through her. Whoever had killed Lily hadn't come from outside. They had already been inside the house. Detective Doyle didn't sleep that night. The discovery of the reflection in Lily's mirror replayed in her mind over and over. The photo captured something no one had noticed before: a hand wearing a leather-strapped watch, faint but unmistakable, standing just behind Lily. It wasn't an intruder outside or a shadow from the yard. The reflection showed someone who had been in the room with her, someone she hadn't feared. It was the missing piece Doyle had been searching for. If Lily hadn't been startled, it meant she knew her killer. The horror of that realization settled deep in Doyle's chest. The murderer had likely been living under the same roof. The next morning, she returned to the Harrison house under the pretext of a follow-up visit. The police had already released the scene, and the family was preparing to move out. The walls had been scrubbed clean, but the air still carried the faint metallic scent of blood. Mr. Harrison met her at the door, looking thinner, paler, his face etched with exhaustion. Mrs. Harrison sat silently in the living room, her hands clasped tightly in her lap. Doyle's eyes drifted to the framed family photos on the mantel, smiling faces that now seemed to mock the tragedy behind them. As they spoke, she noticed a glint of something on Mr. Harrison's wrist, a watch with a worn brown strap. It was identical to the one seen in Lily's mirror. Her heart pounded, but she kept her expression calm. She asked casually when he had last seen Lily's camera, pretending to need confirmation for the report. His answer came too quickly, too rehearsed. He said he hadn't touched it in weeks, yet the fingerprints lifted from it included his. Doyle felt the shift instantly. The pieces she'd been chasing, his prints, the missing photograph, the strange calm he'd shown that first morning, clicked together with chilling clarity. Back at the station, she re-examined the evidence. The DNA from the torn fabric was run through the national database once again. This time, with updated comparisons, it came back as a familial match to Mr. Harrison. Not a perfect match, partial, suggesting a close relative, but enough to warrant further testing. When confronted with this information, Mr. Harrison's composure finally cracked. His voice trembled and his eyes darted to the floor. After hours of questioning, he broke. The confession that followed stunned even the most hardened detectives. He admitted that Lily had discovered something he'd been hiding for years, evidence of financial fraud at his company. She had stumbled upon it while using his laptop for a school project. Terrified that she would expose him, he begged her to stay silent. But Lily had refused. They argued late that night after her mother went to bed. He claimed he only wanted to scare her into keeping quiet, that she had grabbed the knife first, that everything had spiraled out of control. Yet the evidence told a different story. The placement of the wounds, the deliberate nature of the attack, and the missing photo from her wall proved this was no accident. In a desperate attempt to cover his tracks, he had staged the scene to look like a break-in. He took one of her photographs, cut it, and smeared prints on the windowsill to mislead investigators. He'd even reopened the window to suggest someone had climbed in. What he hadn't expected was for Lily's camera to capture his reflection, or for a single torn piece of fabric to betray him. When the truth came out, Maple Heights was consumed by disbelief. The idea that a father could do such a thing shattered the illusion of safety the town had always clung to. Mrs. Harrison moved away within months, leaving the house empty and for sale. No one ever bought it. Neighbors said they still saw a light flicker in Lily's old room some nights, though the electricity had long been disconnected. Detective Doyle never forgot the case. She often thought about the photographs Lily had taken, the sunsets, the smiles, the small moments of beauty, and how they stood in stark contrast to the darkness that had lived inside her home. In the end, the murder of Lily Harrison became more than a headline. It was a warning. Evil didn't always come from strangers lurking in shadows. Sometimes it wore the face of family, spoke with kindness, and slept just down the hall.